Welcome to Angels and Seerstones. I'm Christine.
And I'm Chris.
This is an unusual episode. Today we're turning over our channel to our friends Liz Busby and Carl Cranny from the podcast Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree.
These guys won the Association of Mormon Letters Best Podcast Award this last year. Plus, Liz has been editing and producing for us these past couple months, which has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's cool to get her voice out there. Liz and Carl are talking about Latter-day Saint Star Wars lore.
This is a thing.
It sure is.
Latter-day Saints are a people of radical faith. We are a unique body of Bible-believing Christians. For us, the scriptural canon has been opened. The traditional sacraments have expanded. Our beliefs and practices are steeped in universalism, esotericism, and apocalypticism.
The Latter-day Saint tradition is a religion in which angels visit everyday people, and sometimes men and women see the divine in stones. In this podcast, we examine the lived religion of Latter-day Saints, our beliefs, and our stories.
We take seriously the whole gamut of Latter-day Saint experience. Join us, Christine and Chris Blythe,
two professional folklorists and Latter-day Saint converts,
as we openly discuss our faith while exploring the traditions of our chosen people.
Hi, I'm Liz Busby, a graduate student studying Mormon literature, fantasy, and science fiction at BYU.
Hello, I'm Carl Cranny. I have a PhD in theology from the Catholic University of America, and God willing, will be an adjunct instructor at BYU come winter semester.
And together we host the podcast Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree, where we discuss mainstream movies and TV shows from a Latter-day Saint perspective. Chris and Christine invited us to do some guest episodes on the intersection between folklore and pop culture. Honestly, when I heard the concept, the first place my mind went was Star Wars, probably because we've been working together on a paper about religious clothing in The Mandalorian this summer. But today we want to talk about the classic Mormon legend that the character of Yoda was based on LDS Church President Spencer W. Kimball. The website mormoner.org has a excellently researched page about this topic, which is where we got a lot of the references. So if you want to look that up, that's mormonr.org. If you're not familiar with this legend, a lot of people in the church say that the character of Yoda from Star Wars was based on Spencer W. Kimball, both in like how he looks and some of the things he says. I know that growing up, my dad was absolutely certain this was true. He would tell this story whenever Star Wars came up. His version was that they wanted to base Yoda on someone who had a lot of spiritual wisdom, and President Kimball was an obvious choice, and that they both had a saying about try not, do or do not, there is no try.
Try not, do, or do not. There is no try.
No matter what the cost in toil or sacrifice, we must do it. That is one of my favorite phrases. Do it.
We should follow the counsel of President Spencer W. Kimball and do it. And he added, do it right now.
Carl, did you ever hear this legend growing up?
I did, and I'm not sure that I ever myself fully believed it, but I did do the thing where you put a picture of Yoda up next to a picture of President Kimball, look at them, and I said, yeah, I can see some similarities here. I don't know if the characterization, I would agree with any of the legend around that, but I do think they look like each other. If you needed to morph from one to the other, it would not be hard for the computer to do that, I think.
So I absolutely believed this, probably through college. And I think it's just because my dad was so confident about it. And to him, it was like a mark of pride for our culture to be incorporated into this pop culture phenomenon. And I think that kind of makes sense why we like legends like this. I think most minority groups want recognition for the impact that they make on the larger culture. And so thinking that we contributed to Star Wars in a small way makes us feel good. It's like the dad in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, if you've seen that film, who's always telling people how everything comes from Greek, trying to make a connection with this culture that he's struggling to fit in with.
Right. And I think sometimes this desire to feel accepted or that we are punching above our weight or somehow influential in the larger sort of cultural milieu, sometimes it gets minority groups like ours into trouble. This is a harmless legend about Yoda being based on President Kimball, but you can get into A little more weird stuff like maybe Abraham Lincoln read the Book of Mormon and that's what helped us save the Civil War. Spoiler alert, he did not. You got to be careful with the conspiracy theory sort of side of these sorts of things, but it's a natural human inclination and impulse to just be like, oh, we're important. We had this thing happen because of us, and otherwise it wouldn't have. And
yeah, the only real Star Wars connection that I can find is there's some rumors online that Gary Kurtz, the original producer of Star Wars, was a Latter-day Saint.
But other witches are he's a Quaker, so it's a little unclear. Unless he's hopping religions.
We take Quakers. We're good with that. But the other connection is that Latter-day Saints are nerds.
Oh, 1,000%. Absolutely.
Our podcast is built on this foundation. In 2015, when the first of the new Star Wars trilogy was being released, the Washington Post noticed that Utah had the highest per capita attendance at the new Star Wars movie. People in Utah were about 25% more likely to Google Star Wars than their nearest competitor, which was California. 2 theaters in Utah were in the top 10 nationally for attendance at the new Star Wars movie on opening weekend.
I remember being in line for The Phantom Menace at Winsong Theaters in North Provo, and we had a competition between us and the guys who were at Mann's Chinese Theater, who were the first people in line for Phantom Menace 3 months or something ridiculous before the movie came out. And they had a trivia competition. And because the people in our line had played the Star Wars Trivial Pursuit game so much, we absolutely wiped the floor with those people in Southern California. So yes, Latter-day Saints are nerds. The other one we talked about very briefly in our episode reviewing the Dungeons and Dragons movie last year was that Latter-day Saints play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. We are way higher in Utah and Idaho per capita people who are Googling or interested in Dungeons and Dragons. And the Dead Wars, the world record holding Dungeons and Dragons game, is going in its like a 4th or 5th year at Provo Town Center, run by the We Geek Together store. This is why we would gravitate towards a rumor about Star Wars, because just science fiction and fantasy and sort of nerd culture is just in our blood now. And
it does. I remember all of the national media coverage when Salt Lake City FanX, which was first called Comic-Con, opened, and in its first year became the 3rd biggest fan conference in the nation after LA and New York. And there was national media coverage because they were like, what is going on here? And to everyone in Utah, it was like, yeah, duh. So I was trying to brainstorm. People asked me a lot about why Latter-day Saints enjoy science fiction. Part of it is definitely that it tends to be family friendly. You can go to a Star Wars film with your whole family. I went to see The Phantom Menace with my extended family, all my aunts and uncles, cousins, like 40 of us. It can be a family thing that you do together. It's less likely to have objectionable things like swearing or sex that families might not want to watch. And a lot of science fiction and fantasy tends to engage in religious ideas. And Star Wars has certainly got a lot of religious ideas going on in it.
yeah, I agree. Latter-day Saints enjoy the idea that we will eventually be beings who would rule over planets or travel to the stars or whatever. We also are very happy to see where fantasy deals with issues of gods or religion or magic or supernatural forces. We gravitate very well towards that. But we also don't have some of the cultural hangups that, and I don't mean to pick on these people necessarily, but evangelical Christians get really mad at Harry Potter for teaching witchcraft. We Latter-day Saints don't seem to buy into those kinds of things as well.
I think I've heard a few Latter-day Saints who had those similar hangups over Harry Potter and other fantasy things. But I think it's much less common. And there's definitely institutional support almost for fantasy, especially in recent years, because we've seen Star Wars references make it all the way to General Conference. Elder Uchtdorf gave a talk in 2016 where he mentioned Chewbacca, for example. There are a few BYU devotionals that use Star Wars as a part of a religious analogy.
Every family has moments of awkwardness. Like when your dad arranges a family portrait with everyone dressed like characters in his favorite movie and you get the Chewbacca costume.
The Prince of Darkness has dragged out the heavy artillery. He's no longer limited to arrows and swords and BB guns. Now he is Darth Vader with laser guns, light speeds, and the Death Star.
In reality, it is much easier to be all in than partially in. When we are partially in or not in at all, there is in the Star Wars vernacular a disturbance in the Force.
So there's a lot more signaling coming from the top that this is okay, this is good entertainment. I'm sure that people use Star Wars in talks and lessons in wards, although I can't recall any particular ones. How about you, Carl?
I have one. When we were graduating, class of 99, there was a moment where they had all the seniors in my ward. We all got up and gave a 5-minute talk. It's the congratulations, you're moving on to the next stage of life sort of thing. And my next door neighbor, Melissa, definitely quoted Yoda's line from The Phantom Menace. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. And I think she just threw it in there. I don't remember it flowing really well with the actual major themes and elements of her talk, but she tossed it in there just so she could quote the great philosopher Yoda. So I have definitely seen it live on the ground myself, at least in that one instance. I'm sure there have been others, but that one stands out to me because I remember her coming to me trying to figure out a way we could pigeonhole this quote in to her senior talk as we were graduating from high school.
Yeah, and we could get into more of, does the theology of Star Wars really fit with Latter-day Saint belief? I know there is an academic paper out there about this, especially the original trilogy with this idea of a light and dark side is a little bit more dualistic than most Christianity, but perhaps it fits better with LDS theology, with the plan of salvation, with dueling plans of what is the right way to approach this. You're the theologian, Carl.
Well, yeah, or even opposition in all things from Lehi's sermons at the beginning of 2nd Nephi. That's there. I don't know if I would agree with that. I think that the original trilogy was monotheistic. The prequels were Buddhist and the sequels were spiritual but not religious. But that's maybe a longer conversation. If you want my thoughts on that, you can find me on Twitter and send me a DM.
Fantastic. I think that's all we have to say about Star Wars and Yoda. I think it's a fun part of our culture. This has been Liz and Carl from Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree, encouraging you to seek after everything virtuous, lovely, of good report, or praiseworthy.
Even if Palpatine somehow returned, makes absolutely no sense and should never have happened.
This is true. See you next time.
Thanks for listening, guys. Make sure to check out Liz and Carl's Pop Culture on the Apricot Tree, and we will see you next week to talk about the 3 Nephites.
See you then.